Coming up on Talking Points, a boatload of battleground polls show a tight race with just 6 weeks to go until Election Day. A full breakdown of the latest numbers.
Plus, disturbing comments found on a porn site from the conservative candidate for governor in North Carolina. How it could hurt Trump in the Tar Heel state.
And Hezbollah has vowed for a, quote, battle without limits against Israel. How the country is responding. That and more. Talking Points starts right now.
The battle for the so-called Sun Belt is heating up. Welcome into Talking Points. I'm Luke Radel.
And I'm Jake Morel. As Donald Trump heads to Georgia tomorrow and North Carolina on Wednesday, new polling from the New York Times shows him in the lead in those swing states. Our Alex Burstein joins us now with those important numbers. Alex, good evening.
Yeah, Luke, Jake, I think if we each got $1 for every new poll that's come out this weekend, we'd be able to retire by the end of this week. There's a ton of new numbers, and over the weekend, they were primarily pro-Kamala Harris, a 52-48 win in the CBS poll. And if you go to the battleground states that are going to decide this election, that's a 51-49 lead for the current vice president. But what really matters is looking at the individual states. And as you mentioned, the real important ones right now are those Sun Belt states that willed President Joe Biden to victory back in 2020. Biden had victories in Arizona and Georgia, a narrow loss in North Carolina, but new New York Times polling today has Trump in the lead in all 3 of those states, 5 points in Arizona, 4 points in Georgia, and a narrow 2-point lead in North Carolina. Why is that important? You look at that 220 number for the former president right now. If he's able to win all 3 of those, that goes all the way up to 263. You need 270 to win the election. So how does he get there? You look at these northern battleground states. These are states that are currently with the current vice president Kamala Harris in the lead, but if Trump is able to win either Michigan, Wisconsin, or Pennsylvania, he's able to get over that 270 mark and become the new president of the United States. There are some interesting notes in this new poll, and first and foremost, we're going to look at those Senate races in the Grand Canyon state of Arizona. We mentioned that 5-point lead for the former president Donald Trump, but the Democratic nominee Ruben Gallego actually has the lead, 49-43. So some split ballots in Arizona, and that's what we're seeing here. Very interesting numbers from the New York Times here today.
Really interesting to see that split between how the Senate candidate is doing for the Republicans, Kari Lake, not so well, as opposed to what Donald Trump is doing. She's running pretty far behind him right now in that crucial battleground state of Arizona, Jake.
Yeah, absolutely. And Vice President Harris heads to Arizona later this week to campaign. CNN now reporting tonight that her campaign is considering a visit to the border. Was there any good news for Harris out of these polls over the weekend?
Yeah, I mean, the really good news is we're seeing that voters are starting to think that she can actually make change. And that's something that was not the case a couple of weeks ago. It seemed like she was just going to be the continuation of the current president, Joe Biden. But that's changed. You see the poll here, 47-38. That's a lead that Harris has right now in an NBC poll of her being able to create change. And it's because she's just been painting herself as a new candidate. She has very high favorability numbers, some of the highest we've seen for a presidential candidate since all the way back with 9/11 and George Bush. So these are big swings, and we're also seeing her media strategy kind of pay off. She has been avoiding those hard news interviews, instead doing more lighthearted interviews like this one earlier this week on Oprah Winfrey Show.
I'm a gun owner. Tim Walz is a gun.
I did not know that.
If
And I thought
somebody
that was
breaks in
powerful.
my house, they're getting shot.
Yes, I hear that. I hear that.
Probably should not have said that.
But
My staff will deal with that later.
Yeah.
So you see there a very lighthearted Kamala Harris on the airwaves, and that's what voters like to see. They want a president that they can relate to, and that's what's been really helping her in these last couple of weeks.
Yeah, and I'm sure as journalists, we'd like to see her do more interviews, but it seems like she's able to reach voters, particularly female voters, by going on with Oprah. Thank you very much, Alex. Appreciate you very much. Over the weekend, former President Donald Trump went to Wilmington, North Carolina for a rally in that key swing state. Take a look.
Oh, what a crowd this is. That's a big, beautiful. We flew over it. I said, that's a lot of people. That's a lot of people. We have a little thing called an election coming up, and we're going to win this election. You know, I don't know if you've seen the polls, but they're very good.
And with all the news coming out of there recently, North Carolina is our Talking Points toss-up state of the week. Our Riley Underwood has the latest poll that just came out this morning from that state. Hey, Riley.
Hey Luke, yeah, New York Times and Siena poll have Donald Trump up 2 points on Kamala Harris in the Tar Heel state among likely voters, an improvement from some other recent polls that have the two about even. North Carolina getting even more attention this election because they've gained an electoral vote since the last go-round. Now they have 16 votes, one more than they had, the 15 they had since 2004. That's because of the recent census. Within the state, they have 6 of what we call pivot counties, which are counties that voted for Obama in 08 and 2012 and Trump in 16 and 20. They don't have the biggest populations, but there's a few that could swing it in either way if Harris or Trump can capture the North Carolina vote. Last time North Carolina voted Democrat was in 2008 for Barack Obama, and Donald Trump hopes to keep the streak alive.
Riley, thank you so much. It's a really competitive state for sure.
We're getting resumes from all over. We're getting offers from all over. People are jumping in to help us. We've made a ton of friends in this thing since we've been in. A lot of talented people right now are reaching out to us, and we're right in the process right now of forming a team that we know can still lead us to victory. So we have full confidence in our ability to keep going.
And that was Mark Robinson, the Republican nominee for governor in the Tar Heel state a little earlier today. Robinson is currently the lieutenant governor of North Carolina, but his campaign for the top job has been complicated by new reporting from CNN. Our Peter Berry is tracking this story for us tonight. Peter, what is going on with Mark Robinson?
Hey Luke, North Carolina's Lieutenant Governor Mark Robinson is under criticism after a CNN report was posted showing he wrote comments about how he favored bringing back slavery, enjoying transgender pornographic content, and identified himself as a black Nazi. As Robinson opponents noted, this is a total 180 with his public stance on the transgender community. Former President Trump endorsed Mark Robinson for governor at one of his rallies just last month in North Carolina.
This is Martin Luther King on steroids, okay? Now, I told that to Mark. I said, I think you're better than Martin Luther King. I think you are Martin Luther King ×2. And he looked at me, and I wasn't sure, was he angry? Because that's a terrible thing to say. Thank you. Thank you. Great job, Ted. Mark Robinson, he's out there, he's fighting. He's fighting. He's a great one.
Trump has not taken back his endorsement for Robinson, as it could have major implications on how the state swings for the presidential election. But as top staffers in the Robinson campaign start to walk out the door due to this scandal, Robinson has been denying the allegations that he wrote and any of these things linked to him, as he took to Twitter to talk to voters about his refusal to drop his bid for governor.
Instead, they want to focus on salacious tabloid lies. We're not going to let them do that. We are staying in this race. We are in it to win it. And we know that with your help, we will. God bless you. And we will see you where? On the campaign trail.
So let's take a look at the polling. He's facing current Attorney General Josh Stein, but he's down 11 points according to The Hill. But this report didn't really change anything, as he was already down 10 points. Trump had his rally 2 days ago, but in North Carolina, but he was not mentioned by name or by any of the speakers. But stranger things have happened, as the Republican governor, Pat McElroy, was down less than a point and lost to a Democratic challenger back in 2016 when Trump won the state back in 2016 by more than 4 points.
Yeah, Peter, so interesting here to talk about how the down ballot races are going to affect the presidential race. You look at all these swing states and there's big differences. You look at something like Wisconsin, Tammy Baldwin up big in that Senate race there, but still super close within the presidential race. So I think it's interesting to see how the Trump campaign will maybe try to distance itself from the Robinson campaign going into North Carolina. What do you guys see on that strategy over the next few weeks?
Well, Jake, on that, maybe trying to distance himself, but all that stuff, you can't really take that back. We've seen all the clips. And the Harris campaign, they're capitalizing off of it. They're releasing those attack ads, trying to really link them together, kind of saying this is his guy. So they're kind of trying to link them together, saying Trump's not a very good guy too, if this Robinson thing is actually true. And that's what they're really trying to capitalize on. Trump campaign going to need to be more on the defensive, Harris going on the offensive on this issue.
And in a race so close like we were looking at with Alex before, those 16 electoral votes, that's going to be massive. Like, they need to win North Carolina if you're Donald Trump. He won it in 2016 and won it in 2020.
Yeah, he could lose 3 out of the 6 states, but he has to win North Carolina, he has to win Pennsylvania, he also has to win Georgia. But Mark Robinson isn't going to really bring any swing voters to the Trump conversation, as more moderate voters are not really looking for someone who has comments on a transgender pornographic website.
Yeah. Great points from everyone there. We'll take a look at that poll one more time. We see Josh Stein up by about 11 points. I'm sure we'll see that update a little bit as this Robinson story sinks in a little bit in North Carolina. But coming up on Talking Points, we're learning new details tonight on the suspect in the Trump assassination attempt, the letter prosecutors say he wrote in the months before he targeted the former president.
I don't think that many kids in my son's school even do it.
He makes fun of his friend who vapes.
Yeah, that was great. Good job, guys. Riley, that was really good.
She's into soccer.
She's on the honor roll.
She's just not the type.
No way.
No way.
No way.
No way. My kid would never vape.
Get your head out of the cloud. Today, nearly 8,000 kids will start vaping. Maybe even yours. Learn about the dangers at talkaboutvaping.org.
If you love them enough to crawl into a play place to get them to come down, then surely you'll check nhtsa.gov/the right seat to make sure they're in the right car seat.
Hey, look, it's those guys. Are you good to drive?
I'm fine.
How many did you have?
I should be fine.
You should be.
Go and step out of the vehicle for me.
See ya, buddy. Good luck. So turns out, buzz driving and drunk driving, they're the same thing, and it costs around $10,000. So not worth it.
Welcome back into Talking Points. We're learning new details about the man being held in connection to last week's Trump assassination attempt. Prosecutors say the suspect, Ryan Wesley Ruth, wrote a letter to a person whose name is not being disclosed detailing his plans. In court papers filed earlier today, agents included this letter addressed to, quote, the world, that stated, quote, this was an assassination attempt on Donald Trump, but I failed you. I tried my best and gave it all the gumption I could muster.
Really interesting that he wrote that letter ahead of time, assuming that he would fail. Prosecutors told the court that the person received the package from Ruth several months earlier, but did not open it until after seeing news reports on his arrest. Prosecutors also say the package contained ammunition, a metal pipe, building materials, 4 phones, and various other letters. Ruth is currently being held on 2 federal weapons charges, but more charges and a possible indictment are expected later this week.
Turning now to foreign affairs. Earlier today, almost 500 people were killed and over 1,600 injured by Israeli airstrikes in Lebanon. Talking Points analyst Ben Bascuk is in studio with what we know about the conflict. Ben.
Yeah, thanks, guys. Sirens wailed throughout northern Israel this morning, marking the deadliest day in attacks in Lebanon since 2006. It's the Lebanese war. The IDF reports over 160 rockets and munitions crossing into the Israeli territory. The Lebanese Ministry of Health reports airstrikes killing over 300 people and injuring over 1,000. The death toll of Hezbollah Iran-backed militants was not specified by Lebanon, and no reports of deaths or serious casualties came from Israel. IDF fighter jets conducted 1,300, quote, extensive precise strikes on Hezbollah targets in southern Lebanon and the Bekaa Valley. Main roads to the capital of Beirut clogged with people fleeing to safety, only to encounter another strike. The first attack since Friday, when the IDF assassinated top Hezbollah commanders Ibrahim Akil and Ahmed Wabi. Last Wednesday, IDF operations blew up Hezbollah wireless devices, killing 37 people and wounding thousands. The following footage may be upsetting to some viewers. While election headlines capture the attention of American voters, real foreign threats to our democracy linger in the distance. important issues that could shape who will be America's next commander-in-chief over the next 2 months. Ukraine is bleeding out, China is expanding its geographical reach, and Russia may help Iran cross the finish line in its race for nuclear weapons. This week, the Bipartisan Commission on National Defense reports that the U.S. faces, quote, the most serious and most challenging threat since 1945, including the real risk of near-term major war. The report warns the nation was last prepared for such a fight during the Cold War, which ended 35 years ago. It is not prepared today. We will obviously keep you guys updated as the Lebanon Ministry of Health and Israeli government continue providing us information, but right now that's all for me. Back to you guys.
Ben, thank you so much. Great work. That report doesn't exactly help you sleep at night, for sure. Joining us now is Talking Points analyst Fernando Traversari, who has the latest details regarding the recent cyber attacks on the Trump campaign, which the FBI says is related to Iran. Nando, what's going on with these hacks?
Yeah, look, good evening. Well, this isn't the first time a foreign country has been accused of meddling in a U.S. election. As we all know, in 2016, Russia was involved in interference efforts aimed at supporting Donald Trump's presidential campaign. Except this time around, the FBI is pointing fingers at Iran, accusing their government of not only hacking into the Trump campaign and, of course, stealing private material, but also sending that same unsolicited information to the then Biden campaign this past summer. While Biden recently withdrew from the race and was replaced by Kamala Harris as the Democratic nominee, Trump remains concerned that the opposition may still possess sensitive unsolicited information, and has even baselessly claimed that Biden was involved in these attacks, despite the statement made by the law enforcement officials. Here's what the former president had to say about the hackers at his rally in Long Island this last Wednesday. Take a listen.
They just released a report confirming that Iran actors hacked into the Trump campaign's email accounts and in turn sought to give the hacked materials to the Biden-Harris campaign. They gave them all of the materials because Biden is working with Iran, and Iran doesn't exactly like me because they were ready to make a deal, except we had an election that was rigged and stolen.
And of national security, a spokesperson for the Harris campaign, Morgan Finkelstein, responded to these attacks, stating, quote, "We're not aware of any material being sent directly to the campaign. A few individuals were targeted on their personal emails, but that what looked like a spam or phishing attempt. We condemn in the strongest terms in any effort by foreign actors to interfere in U.S. elections, including this unwelcome and unacceptable malicious activity."
It's important to note that there's no evidence that the Biden or Harris campaigns were involved with the hack, and obviously the 2020 election was not rigged and stolen. But I guess I want to ask, is there any reason why Iran is alleged to be targeting the Trump campaign ahead of this election, and why they're not targeting maybe the Kamala Harris campaign?
Yeah, that's a great question. Well, we certainly do not know the exact reasons as to why Iran is specifically targeting Trump. Perhaps it could be a retaliation for the U.S. assassination of top Iranian General Qasem Soleimani, which actually occurred under President Trump's administration 4 years ago. Or it could just simply be to compromise or destabilize American democracy in general. We don't know. However, as far as the Biden-Harris campaign is concerned, they have also been subject of unsuccessful Iranian cyber attacks this past month. On a joint FBI statement this past month, the Office of the Director of National Intelligence and Cybersecurity and Infrastructure Security Agency explained how these Iranian efforts have sought access to presidential campaigns in actually both political parties. So again, it is evident that U.S. intelligence officials are growing increasingly uneasy about foreign interference as the November election approaches. Of course, Iran, the Iranian government has naturally denied these allegations along with these cyber attacks. But the key concern now is that if these hackers can target candidates in a broader effort to sway the election in November, what else could they do? So again, this is a national security matter. And if Iran or any other foreign entity for that matter continue to leak more critical documents ahead of the voting day, it could potentially have a profound impact on the outcome of one of the most pivotal presidential races in our recent history. Jake, Luke.
Nando, thank you. Coming up on Talking Points, big news from the Fed. Their first rate cut in 4 years. We'll go over the potential impacts it could have on the presidential race. Stay with us.
They told me a bottle couldn't dream. That I would never become a superhero. But I learned how to fly. Just to come back in a new disguise. And be the hero that I've always wanted to be.
Welcome back. The news out of the Federal Reserve that shocked Wall Street and cut interest rates by 0.5 percentage point. This is the first rate cut since the beginning of the pandemic. The move brings rates down to between 4.75 and 5%. The question now is how this rate cut could impact the upcoming election. For that, we bring in our Talking Points analyst, Ethan Kraut. Good evening, Ethan.
Hey Luke, this is some big economic news coming out of the Fed's September meeting, signaling an easing of inflation. With the rate cut comes lower mortgage rates as well. The standard 30-year fixed-rate mortgage averaged 6.09% last week, down from the previous week's 6.2% average. This is a significantly lower also than the 7.79% rate seen last fall, the highest we have seen rates in 2 decades. This week's rates are the lowest mortgage rates have been since February 2023. Now, the market soared Thursday after the positive economic news, with both the S&P 500 and the Dow hitting record highs. This is not only a big win for investors, but also for Vice President Kamala Harris, with the election only 43 days away. While recent polls have shown her with a slight lead on former President Trump, she is still trailing him on the issue of the economy. Harris has suffered from being in office while inflation has soared. This news, however, provides hard evidence that the economy is in fact improving under her and President Biden's administration. Republicans have taken issue with the Fed's timing in cutting rates. Stephen Moore, an outside economic advisor for Trump, said the decision seemed unwise and jaw-dropping. He added, quote, "I'm not saying a 50-point reduction isn't justified. It may well be, and they have more data than I do. But I just think, why now? There's no reason they couldn't do 25 now and 25 right after the election. Why not wait till then?" End quote. Now, it's worth noting that the Federal Reserve is an independent, non-political agency. Now, some economists say this rate cut isn't all good news, but also signals the Fed's efforts to head off potential economic slowdown.
Yeah, Ethan, it's really interesting to see how Kamala Harris has been trying to counterbalance her being down on that issue of the economy, the most important issue for voters. So what has she been saying so far about her economic plan?
Yeah, so the Harris campaign has really been trying to pit her specific economic policies against those of the Trump campaign. Harris has consistently stated that her economic policies are intended to help everyday Americans, while Trump's are intended to help himself and his rich friends. Now, Harris is also expected to roll out some new economic policies this week at a rally in Pennsylvania. The focus of those is wealth creation. She has said that the economic policy in this election can not only be just about lowering inflation, but also helping Americans reach their American dreams. Guys?
Ethan, thank you. We'll have to see if prices stabilize rolling into November. Well, for the first time in 28 years, the Teamsters Union did not endorse a presidential candidate, but that didn't stop local unions from taking a stance. Multiple Teamster unions have voiced their support for Vice President Harris, including ones in key battleground states. With how this could help Harris's bid is Talking Points analyst Andrea Rose Oates. Andi, good evening.
Good evening, Jake. The International Brotherhood of Teamsters, one of the United States' largest and most well-known labor unions, has decided not to endorse any candidate in the 2024 presidential election. This is coming after major divide amongst the Teamsters members, not deciding who they feel best represents their policies and their beliefs as workers. Now, this is the first time since 1996 that this has happened for the Teamsters organization, but that doesn't take away from the fact that this is still a very tight race. Workers' unions across the country have come out to publicly endorse a candidate that they feel represents their best practices and values, and that candidate happens to be Vice President Kamala Harris. Vice President Harris in the past has come from a Democratic administration that has done a lot, especially to help uplift workers across the country. She and President Biden last summer stood on the picket lines with UAW workers while they were on strike, and also recently helped to pass the Protect the Right to Organize Act. However, a few years ago, Vice President Harris did leave Teamsters workers in a very bad space when she sent them back to work under less than ideal working conditions, and that didn't leave a lot of Teamsters members very happy with her ever since then. The Teamsters members are a very powerful group, especially here in the United States. They make up about 1 million of today's workers across all industries in the United States, and also are very representative in the current election cycle as well. In 2024, September 2024, when Teamsters members were surveyed about who they feel should be the national endorsement on behalf of the organization, 58% supported Republican candidate Donald Trump, while 31% believed that Vice President Harris would be the best choice. Now, the Teamsters organization, like I mentioned, is very powerful, specifically in the Midwest, and also other swing states that could tell the potential of the 2024 presidential election. On the other hand, you have former President Donald Trump's policies, and he hasn't always had the best pass, specifically with workers across the United States. Most of his 2024 presidential campaign has specifically been aimed towards counting workers in his populist message and not being a very good representation for them as well. Here's video of the national president of the Teamsters organization discussing what he thinks will be the election cycle turnout.
You know, look, I criticize President Trump. I'll criticize anybody that attacks labor, crosses picket lines, or whatever else. And this was not an endorsement for the Republican Party. This is a wake-up call that the system is broken.
It's unclear to see if the national endorsement from the Teamsters organization will truly help any candidate in the 2024 presidential election, but it is something to keep a close eye on. Guys?
Andi, thanks so much. And we come back, the gender gap in recent polls between Trump and Harris. We're breaking it all down. Stay with us.
They said a bottle was just a bottle. That no one would ever notice me. But I knew I could be more. That one day, I would make people smile.
Jordan knows he shouldn't eat this entire bowl of nachos, but tonight he's earned that right. Because a few hours ago in the middle of happy hour, he recognized a sign. Not from the gods or a bolt of lightning, but from a double heart, a kissy face, and a fourth ha in ha ha ha. That's when Jordan knew he was buzzed. So when it was time to go, he got a ride home instead of driving. Be a legend like Jordan. Recognize your buzzed warning signs and get a ride home. Buzz driving is drunk driving.
Welcome back into Talking Points. Taking a look at the polls from this weekend. The gender gap, Jake, is the thing that we're watching most closely. 58% of women say they support Kamala Harris, compared to just 37% who say they support Donald Trump. When you flip the genders, those numbers flip too. 52% of men say they support Donald Trump, while just 40% say they're supporting Kamala Harris right now.
Luke, so interesting there. If we go on to the next slide here, I want to talk a little bit about the young white men and Donald Trump phenomenon. We could see sort of the decline in support for the Democratic Party among males since 2016, citing the economy as their most important issue. But if you go ahead a little bit here, I want to point out that Trump has taken advantage of things that are growing more popular with young white men.
He's been
and
all
one thing
over.
I want to point out is Dana White right there. He spoke at the RNC. He is the president of the UFC. That's become very, very popular among young white men. So I just thought that's interesting that Trump is strategizing off of that. But that's all the time we have for you on this episode of Talking Points. Be sure to follow us on Twitter and Instagram at CitrusTV News and like us on Facebook. I'm Jake Morel.
And I'm Luke Radel. Have a great night, Syracuse, and go Bills.
Go Bears.